So the most radical, militant radicals became known as populists. Populists. It means people who want to be close to the people, to peasants, to help peasants. And I showed this portrait of this guy, Nikolai Chernyshevsky, last time. He was one of the first populists. He wrote a book called What is to be Done? The traditional Russian question. What is to be done? 1862, I think, yeah, 1862, where it's a novel. It's a novel that was published in Russia in a cryptic language, trying to bypass the official censorship. He actually showed the utopian future. So in the form of dreams, there are two characters in this novel. One lady, one of the representatives of this intelligence, and a guy who fell in love with each other, but then they decided not to continue their love because the plight of the people, peasants, was horrible, and they decided to devote their life to liberation of peasants. And they sleep and they have these dreams, 3 chapters devoted to these dreams, how people are going to live in future society. So he describes this pastoral landscape, how peasants would be collectively working, how these intellectuals would be enlightened masters, not, he doesn't call them masters, enlightened navigators of this society, educating peasants, okay? Promoting the cause of liberation of the people. It's hard to read novel. It's at that time it was extremely popular in Russia. It was published in a few languages. And when Russian government realized what this novel did, he was arrested and sent into exile in Siberia. Okay. So this book, this novel, became like a message for the intellectuals what to do. You need to band together to help people, to go to the people. You need to go to the people. So that was the first, to be close to the people.
I've been really asked this. When we talk about like people getting exiled to Siberia, were there like people like on the guard, making sure that nobody came back from Siberia, or was it just like go out into the woods?
Well, you know what kept them there?
Yeah, they just like come back. There was nobody like once they got in, no one could keep track of them. So like what made them stay?
Yeah, to some extent you're right. In many people like him, people who were exiled, nobody kept track of them. They were obligated once a month to come and to get registered with the police inspector. Sometimes remote areas are once in a quarter. Okay. Or a police inspector came to visit them once in a quarter to check on them, because it was practically impossible to escape from Siberia. Okay? Even later, under Stalin's time, when Gulag was created, concentration camps, some camps were not surrendered by barbed wire because you couldn't escape. If you escaped, you would be dead. Okay. So that's Siberia. That's the beauty of Siberia. It's a heaven for an authoritarian leader, so you can shoot people there. And you don't need to invest into this, building Auschwitz or some kind of... Okay. So these populist militant group who wanted to do something for the people, they read this book, and the message was that you need to be close to the people. You need to come to the people. And that's what they eventually started doing. Okay. So let me interrupt myself for a second. Okay, here we go. So I apologize that I have to conflate 2 PowerPoint presentations to be consistent, because that's how it is. So what I just said is mentioned here, ideals of populists. many of them were originally Westerners, I repeat. But eventually, they started to glorify peasant coming, and in this case, we cannot call them Westerners. The only link that connected them to Western movements was their sympathy with socialism. I hate to say it, but what they preached could be labeled National Socialism. Okay, so it's glorification of Russian peasant communism and socialism. If you bring it together, it's National Socialism. Later, in some countries, you could observe similar movements. Okay, although people don't like to establish these links, you know. So the last bullet point is the key here. So it's a faith that future Russian society would emerge based on the village common. How to accomplish this? So their goal empire, czar landlords, peasants. So their goal was to destroy the top of this pyramid. So what do we need to do? To give power to the peasants, to the people. And that's when, again, populists also here became divided into two groups. See, I don't want to confuse you too much. So we have Westernizers who split into classical liberals and radicals. Radicals give rise to populists. Okay? And the populists eventually became split in two groups. Okay? So let me... Here we go. That's better. Let's go to the people, to the villages. Let's ignite one group of these folks. Let's ignite radical change. We're going to dress as peasants, craftsmen. Come and live with peasants. We'll come and live with peasants and preach the revolution. So we need to stir this crowd. We might teach them how to read, how to write. If we know some medical skills, we might do some medical services in villages. Okay? And that's what you may read in this book, which I gave you to read, The Girl Assassin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of the books that I gave you to read describes this movement. Okay, Vera Zasulich, who later became terrorist, so she was part of this movement. In some books, it's described like this. So they tried to reach peasants. They tried to stir them instigate them to revolt against the regime. Unfortunately, peasants became so unresponsive. Many peasants treat them as religious sectarians somehow, or suspicious of them. Some peasants turned them into the police. So, in order to promote their agenda, they had to cheat. They printed, last time I told you, they printed false, fake manifestos, supposedly coming from the Tsar, that you received your land for free, but landlords were hiding the Tsarist manifesto, so please revolt against these evil landlords. Okay? And they were able, in the two villages, they were able to stir the peasants. But the rest of Russia was not responsive. Peasants still were obsessed with the Tsar. They treated the Tsar as the benevolent father. Okay? In some books which describe this movement, they say that this failed movement, going to the people, later gave rise to terrorism. It's correct to some respects, but I have to tell you that from the very beginning, there were essentially two groups of people among populists. Those who said, let's do these small deeds, helping people, we need to live among the peasants. And the second group, they said, we need to use violence against the regime. At first, we see this populists who wanted to be close to peasants more influential at first. Let's live with people, helping them, and maybe we'll be able to stir them for a revolution. But in the process of their failure, we have a second trend, the second group of people becoming influential. Again, we are not talking about tens of thousands of people here. We are talking about a few hundreds of people. Okay, it was a tiny minority of intellectuals who were preaching these ideals. So, going to the people group, losing its influence, and a group of people who preached terror, who said, people we love these people, but they're so ignorant, unfortunately. We need to help them. Okay? So, fiasco of going to people. Okay. I would like to bring to your attention something which is not mentioned in books, unfortunately. In the middle of this going to the people, populists glorifying, romanticizing peasant communism, something happened in southern Russian city of Odessa. Now it's part of Ukraine. 1871 pogrom. Pogrom, it means a riot, looting of the stores when crowds, mobs of peasants and marginal folks, like thugs, town thugs, raided stores, workshops, diners, restaurants that belong to Jews. Okay? Huge destruction was inflicted on downtown of Odessa. A lot of businesses were ruined. And some Jews were killed, beaten and killed as a result of this pogrom. Again, pogrom, and later, as you know, this expression entered the English usage. If you look in the dictionary, you can see this. Now we're using this to describe some kind of violent, very violent riot that accompanied with the murder of people who are selected to be scapegoats. Okay, so you are evil, you are responsible. So that's what mobs, some Russian mobs, common people, I repeat, poor people, peasants and town residents, unemployed people who attack Jewish businesses. And some populists said it was good. Why? Because it's a voice of the people. Jews were exploiters, oppressors. But there were some populists who said, wait a second, what's going on? Some of these workshops where Jews were killed, they were hardly able to make the ends meet. How can you label them as oppressors? Especially those Jews who were part of the populist movement. I forgot to tell you that many populists were represented by Jews. Okay, those Jews who wanted to get assimilated into Russian culture, who worshipped peasant labor. Why? Because they thought that Jews lost this connection with the land, being involved in so-called quote-unquote Jewish professions. So we need to learn from Russian peasants because they know how to be close to the land. Okay, but forget about it. And so these Jews who were part of the populist movement, these men and women, they were very confused about this, how some of their Russian friends could endorse these pogroms. In all fairness, there were some Jews who also endorsed these pogroms in Odessa, who said, yes, our people, our quote-unquote tribe, these were exploiters, restaurant owners, you know. They deserved what they got. I don't know. So it created this huge dilemma in the movement. Okay? And eventually, the reason I wanted to bring it up to your attention is at the end of the 19th century, there were few other pogroms. And that's what eventually created a room for Marxism to enter. Because Marxism gave some Russians and Jews, Russian and Jewish revolutionaries, populists, a way to escape this, okay? Because Marxism, I'm jumping ahead, that preached the brotherhood of all people, of all the world, okay? Who would eventually revolt against capitalism. It was a nice escape, ideological escape for them. Because it was a huge challenge for populists, socialists, okay? And that's what, by the way, provoked Jews after 1817 to escape to Palestine, in addition to other countries where Jews moved to, United States, England. Many Jews went to Palestine, including some Jewish socialists who said, we cannot find escape on this land because we're constantly going to be object of this discrimination. So we are socialists, but we are going to Palestine and we will build socialist communities there, collective communities, that like Russian peasants, but it will be Jewish peasants. Okay? And that's eventually, this notion eventually evolved in the concept of kibbutz. You heard about kibbutz? Mm-hmm. Kibbutz. Labor Zionism, that's the movement that eventually emerged out of this. So we need to go to Palestine. It's good, it's our land. But at the same time, we don't want to be like die-hard nationalists. Our ideal is socialism. So labor Zionism is the answer. So we're going to create these Jewish peasant communities. We're going to learn manual labor. We will nourish these swamps and deserts of Palestine. And they will flourish. And they did it, by the way. Okay? Not many Palestinians will admit this, but that's a fact, you know. So, this detour is very important, what we just mentioned. Well, let's go back to Russia. So what about these populists who remained in Russia? These few hundred of people. So more and more in desperation, failing to stir peasants, inviting them to participate in revolution. They started to turn to terrorism. Okay, and that's when the small group of people said that terror is the only answer. They created an organization called People's Will that said we need to conspire to take power. Peasants are too uneducated to understand that they need freedom. We have to liberate peasants from up above. See, we are going to destroy this pyramid, and we are going to be in charge of this pyramid. So the goal was to kill the Tsar, and they started literally to hunt him. 7 attempts were made on the life of Alexander II, and the 7th attempt succeeded. So the small terrorist organization, something to give you an idea what it was, a tiny group of people. The whole number of People's Will was about, what, 80, 90 people. To give you an idea what it was, I can compare it with the so-called Weather Underground. You heard about Weather Underground in the United States? A group of violent idealists believed that they could take power in the United States by what? Using violence. Killing policemen, robbing banks, targeting governmental buildings. That's what they believed. They were, again, you can call them, of course, from outside evil people, but they were true believers, fanatics. Okay? And these people also fanatics. They were true believers. What can you do about it? So the terror was the major weapon for them, and eventually they succeeded. So
I think this was also going on in Europe as well. They assassinated the Empress of Austria.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't just limited to...
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, the People's Will became the role model for the European sympathizers, okay? Because they were the most kind of considered the bravest. You know? Look, you mentioned Austria-Hungary, right?
Yes.
Similar situation. Austria-Hungary, of course, it was not so underdeveloped as Russia. It was more developed, but similar. A backward empire based on peasant labor, right? If you look at the eastern part of Austro-Hungarian Empire. The same desire among the so-called revolutionaries, terrorists, who wanted to destroy the emperor, to cut him away, to destroy landlords, and to take over power and navigate society toward the bright future. That was the ideal, okay? Interesting example. So if you are interested in learning how it succeeded, so it's you don't need to write it down. That is why I'm using like 2 presentations, too detailed. Just look at this. The first attempt involved 1 student, Moscow University student, who actually was a theoretician. He talked about individual terror. So you don't need a group, because group easy to decipher. So and he purposely kind of separated himself and decided to do on his own, in order not to involve his comrades. Okay? So eventually he was caught. There be a few others. Again, you don't need to write it down. It's just for your information. Okay? Students, mostly students. Interesting, eh? Students. Okay, People's Will. That's a program. Okay. Names, just for your information. Again, you don't need to write it down. If you wish, you can, because too many names. I don't want to give you too many names. You will be confused. Okay. See, the point was, by killing a Tsar, they thought they might provoke the population, since the missing Tsar creates this vacuum of power, and that was the expectation. See, tiny group, 90 active people with a few hundred of sympathizers. Okay. Of these 200-300 people, only 80, 90 active people. Okay, March the 1st, the Tsar was killed. Okay. they tried everything. Once they even tried to blow the train Alexander II used. Okay, at some point they even planted dynamite in the Winter Palace. That's in the downtown of St. Petersburg. It's a palace where the Tsars spent much of their year. Cold winter month was spent there, but nothing helped. And only when he took a ride in a cart. Let me show you another presentation that gives you a better. That's the best representation. So he was taking a ride, and in the last attempt, they had a few projects how to assassinate him. So they had the last project to catch him when he was using his cart of moving from point A to point B. A few people surrounded this the Tsar, and one of them threw a bomb, and the bomb exploded and wounded actually a couple of his guards, and the Tsar went outside and tried to help one of the guards, raising him from the ground. And that's when another revolution stepped in and shot him. Okay. So it's very sad, because the Tsar, the liberal Tsar, who did try to do something on a limited scale, of course, since he was a representative of his noble class, suffered, and indeed suffered for not giving complete freedom to the peasants, which was the fact of life. Okay, peasants were not liberated. Okay, they were not given land for free, like in Poland. In Poland, some peasants received land for free because Russian Tsar wanted to instigate them against Polish lords who were revolting against the Tsar. Okay? So if it had been done in the rest of Russia, much could be avoided, but the Tsar didn't do it because he represented his class of people. And here we go, we have a group of terrorists who decided to use violence to instigate a revolution, who equally failed. Okay? They were caught, major spearheads of this assassination were hanged. Okay? And one of them was able to escape. One of the revolutionaries turned out to be a police agent who to the last moment was monitoring this group, but he didn't want the police. He eventually had to escape from secret police because they hated him, and from his comrades who found out he was a traitor. The guy, his name is the guy, he had to escape to the United States, to hide in South Dakota, where he became professor of mathematics. The guy, a police agent, that there is a biography of him written in English. Exists a biography of the student who was sympathized with this group of people who wanted to kill the Tsar. At the same time, he was recruited as a police agent. And that's where our story ends. Next time we are going to discuss what happened after the Tsar was killed. And again, as a just jumping ahead, I want to let you know that huge conservative wave started in Russia as a response to this revolutionary terror. Okay, that's what we're going to discuss next time.